Buenas tardes, Barcelona, and thank you all very much for being here this afternoon, and especially thanks to the entire fearless family of organizers from Barcelona and Camus who've put together this extraordinary conference with participants from so many different cities and countries around the world. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here. I come here today as the daughter of two longtime municipalists. So it gives me special pleasure that this conference is being held, coincidentally, on the 30th anniversary of the candidacy of my mother, Beatrice Bookchin, who happens to be sitting right over there, who ran for city council. In Burlington, Vermont in 1987 on an explicitly municipalist platform of building an ecological city, a moral economy, and above all, citizens' assemblies that would contest the power of the nation state. And she ran not once, but twice during those years. And while she didn't win her seat, she's paved the way and really since mentored a whole new generation of municipalists in Burlington, who this spring also ran a tremendous campaign against a very powerful incumbent and came within just a few dozen votes of winning. But more importantly, they've changed the nature of politics in Burlington, energizing an entire neighborhood and enlivening citizens' democracy as never before. And I'm so proud that they're all here. Many of them are here, including my mom, who's now in her 80s. In Barcelona to continue to learn and share ideas and grow together and participate in this summit. And it's also special for me to be in Barcelona with its radical past because my father, the social theorist and libertarian municipalist Murray Bookchin, really loved Barcelona so much and wrote very passionately in his book about the heroic years of Spanish anarchism. And so Barcelona is a particularly fitting place to be spreading the ideas internationally of municipalism and direct democracy with its wonderful, rich history of anarchist collectives during the Spanish Revolution. And as somebody who kind of grew up, my father that is, as a young communist and was very educated in Marxist theory, in some ways his sort of life or his trajectory, his political trajectory, really stands as a kind of example of why I think municipalist politics is so important. Because as a young Marxist and a communist and eventually a Trotskyist, he became increasingly troubled by the economic sort of reductionist modes of thinking that had historically permeated the Marxist left, and was searching for a more expansive notion of freedom, not just freedom from exploitation that is economically based, class-based, but freedom that encompassed all manner of oppression, race, class, gender, ethnicity. And so it was at the same time in the early 1960s that it became increasingly clear to him that capitalism was on a collision course with the natural world. Unlike many people who were becoming concerned about environmental issues, such as air pollution, Murray believed you couldn't address these problems piecemeal, trying to save forests one day and opposing nuclear power the next, because ecological stability was under attack by capitalism. That is to say, the profit motive, the grow or die ethos of capitalism was fundamentally at odds with the ecological stability of the planet. So in the early 1960s, he began to elaborate this idea that he called social ecology, which starts from the premise that all ecological problems are social problems, and that we will never properly address issues like climate change and other environmental problems that are undermining the stability of the planet unless we address the underlying issues of domination and hierarchy. So Murray said that in order to heal our rapacious relationship to the natural world, we really have to fundamentally alter those social relations and on every level, you know, whether it be oppression, domination of women by men, of lesbian, gays, and transgender people by straights, of people of color by whites, and the list goes on. And the question for him became, how do we bring a new egalitarian society into being? What type of alternative social organization will create a society that truly emancipates human beings and that allows us all to flourish, and that heals our rift with the natural world? And when we start to think about that form of organization, well, the municipality becomes a very logical arena to look at. And he was, of course, a student of history and a student of cities, and so he started to talk about how it would be that in cities and towns people can come together beyond even class distinctions, but actually as neighbors and friends, community members who care about their environment, who care about each other. And he really felt that municipalism, which he called it libertarian municipalism or communalism, offered a kind of a third way out of the deadlock between the Marxist and anarchist traditions. It rejects the idea of seizing state power, which we all know from looking at the example of the Soviet Union is a rather hopeless pursuit. And he, at the same time, said that activists have to acknowledge that we won't, in the more anarchist tradition, achieve social change simply by taking our demands to the street. Large encampments and demonstrations may challenge the authority of the state, but they have never yet succeeded, at least in our era, in usurping the authority of the state. So those who engage only in a politics of protest or organizing on the margins of society would do well to recognize that there will always be power. It doesn't simply dissolve. The question is, in whose hands will power reside? In the centralized authority of the state or on the local level with the people? Moreover, as we reflect on the terrible impact that capitalism is having on the climate, on the air we breathe, the pesticides and the food we eat, the social conditions that have bred, for example, a massive, massive heroin epidemic in the United States and a staggering refugee crisis. In fact, really nothing less than global impoverishment and suffering of the vast majority of the world's population. As we think about how we can turn our anguish over social and economic injustice into true political transformation, it becomes increasingly clear that we will never achieve the kind of profound social change that we so desperately need merely by going to the ballot box. Social change won't occur by voting for the candidate who promises a $15 minimum wage, free education, family leave, and in many cases offers various platitudes about social justice. Those things are nice ideals, but they won't really fundamentally transform society in the way that we need to by activating a citizen movement. So and moreover, they often turn us into mere voters who kind of confine ourselves to voting for the lesser of evils. And those are the sort of bones that social democracy throws our way. And when we play into that and support candidates only who tell us things that we want to hear, we ultimately are supporting the very centralized state structure that keeps us oppressed, that keeps us down. Municipalism, on the other hand, offers us a chance to build organizations that go into government, but on the local level where delegates can be held accountable and remain responsive to the grassroots, to the assemblies that place them there. And though often overlooked by the left, there's actually a very, very rich history of directly democratic politics, of citizen government, self-government, from Athens, Greece, to the Paris Commune, the anarchist collectives of Spain, as I mentioned, Chiapas, Mexico, here in Spain, Barcelona and Camus, and other Spanish cities, and now of course, Rojava, which is another very important municipalist model that we have to support. So it's extremely important that we understand that a municipalist politics is about much more than bringing a progressive agenda to City Hall. Important as that may be, municipalism really has to return politics to its original definition as a moral calling based on rationality, community, creativity, free association, and freedom. It's a richly articulated vision of a decentralized assembly democracy in which people act together to chart a rational future. Municipalism demands that we return power to ordinary citizens, that in fact that we reinvent what it means to do politics and what it means to be a citizen. True politics, I would argue, is the opposite of parliamentary politics. It begins at the base. It's transparent, with candidates who are 100% accountable to their neighborhood organizations, who are delegates rather than wheeling and dealing in back rooms the way our representatives do so often. It celebrates the power of local assemblies to transform and be transformed by an increasingly enlightened citizenry. And it's celebratory because in the very act of doing politics at the local level, we become new human beings. We build an alternative to capitalist modernity. As the mayor of Grenoble, Eric Piolle, said yesterday, the consumers that capitalism wants to reduce us to. So municipalism is not only an end, but a means, a prefigurative strategy that would allow us to educate and organize around ecological, anti-capitalist, and anti-state principles. And you know, that point is particularly important because municipalism asks the questions, what does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to live in freedom? How do we organize society in ways that foster mutual aid, caring, and cooperation? And these questions and the politics that follow from them carry an ethical imperative because we have an imperative to live in harmony with the natural world, or we destroy the basis for life itself. But also because we have a moral imperative to maximize equality and freedom. So, in other words, in another sense, we're fighting now not only against the simplification of the planet and the ecological systems on which we depend, but against the simplification of the human spirit. Today, in hundreds of communities around the world, we're taking the idea of democracy and expressing it in its fullest potential, creating a politics that meets human needs, that fosters sharing and cooperation and mutual aid and solidarity, a politics that also recognizes that women who have been on the receiving end of systems of command and obedience, hierarchy and domination must play a leadership role. And it's really a deep longing for freedom, for society, a society that's not hierarchical, one in which every voice is heard, in which we share resources rationally and ensure that every human being can exercise his or her fullest potential. In closing, I'd just like to suggest that there are a couple of very specific things that I think the experience from Barcelona and Camus can teach us. One of them is about education. You know, the Greeks used the word paideia, not just the way we think of education in school, but the education of fully rounded citizens. And that is something that happens when we get together in local assemblies and also when we get together in forums like this, and it's something that we have to keep doing. Another aspect is to emulate, I think, some of the very important work Barcelona and Camus has done in creating a platform, beginning with an ethical set of guidelines by which we can live and run candidates who are responsive to the base, who function not as representatives but as delegates of the assembly. And I think that's a tremendously important thing. We create a minimum program, things like ending home foreclosures and stopping the destabilization of our neighborhoods through gentrification, but also a maximum program in which we re-envision what society could be if we could build a caring economy and harness new technologies to reduce toil. Finally, I think we have to take our politics into every corner of our neighborhoods, doing what the conservatives all around the world have done so successfully in the last few decades, running candidates on the municipal level for wherever we can, school board, water commission, environmental positions, and of course mayor. And we must confederate and work across national and state borders, developing programs that will address regional and even international issues. And this is a particularly important response to those who say that we won't be able to solve the great transnational problems by acting at the local level, because in fact, it's precisely at the local level where these problems are being solved day in and day out. And even such great issues as climate change can be managed through the confederation of communities that send delegates to regional and even continental assemblies. But to do that, we need to create lasting political institutions on the local level, not merely politicians who articulate a social justice agenda, but institutions that are directly responsive to local assemblies, to the people, that are accountable, anti-capitalist, ecologically aware, and that really give voice to the aspirations of the people. And this will require time and education, but I think that this is really our only hope of creating the fundamental political change, of becoming the new human beings that we must become if we're to build a new society. This is our time. Around the world, people want not merely to survive, but to live. If we are to transition from the death spiral society that decades of neoliberalism has foisted upon us to a new rational society that delivers on the promise of humankind, we must create a global network of fearless cities, towns, and villages. We deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.